Welcome to the Near Memo, a weekly conversation about search, social, and commerce. What happened, why it matters, and the implications for local.
Hey everyone, welcome to episode 187 of the Near Memo with David, Mike, and for those of you watching on YouTube, not Greg, we have a special guest with us today, Stephanie Verilhac of Siinda, which is an organization that Mike and I and Greg have all been fortunate enough to know about and to participate in their events for a long time. But Stephanie, great to have you here, and maybe you can kind of lay out what Siinda is about and kind of your role at Siinda and how we got connected for this podcast and the project that we're going to discuss.
Thanks very much, Dave and Mike. Really good to see you there. And indeed, I think we've known each other for quite some time now, and it's good to be involved across the pond. So Siinda is a non-profit trade organization grouping together member companies who are active in the digital space and the local space. So our member range goes from former Yellow Pages to solution providers to website hosters and digital players and I would say the common ground is that they all help small businesses enhance their digital presence. So it can be through a variety of different solutions. And Siinda itself is so the trade organization. What we do is we provide thought leadership for the whole sector. So we organize events in order to highlight the trends and the different directions in which the sector is going. And we also do all kind of legal and regulatory monitoring, which is the part I overlook. So definitely lately, with the EU being very active in the overall digital space, it's been quite active, let's say. And that's one of the reasons why we got together with Near Media, especially on a particular project, which is linked to the application of the Digital Markets Act. And we wanted to see from a user perspective how the application of the Digital Markets Act was perceived, and if the alleged compliance mechanisms that have been put in place were effectively seen from the user perspective. So that's why we partnered with David, Mike, and Greg at Near Media to run this study.
Yeah, that's great, and we were very happy to team up on this. I think Siinda and Near Media are very much aligned in terms of understanding the centrality of Google in the local search experience. I mean, the market share on both sides of the Atlantic for Google in local is approximately 100%. I'm sure it's something slightly less than that since the advent of ChatGPT, but still clearly the dominant player. And the European Commission has designated Google as a gatekeeper in online search. Their revenues are large enough, and they have a large enough installed user base in the European Union that they're one of the 6, I think maybe now 7 companies that are subject to the Digital Markets Act. And so just to give a quick refresher for those of you who hadn't heard some of our previous podcasts, Near Media ran a study earlier this year after Google introduced its sort of first, as Stephanie said, alleged compliance with the Digital Markets Act, introducing a couple of new search engine results page user interface elements, and sort of saying that they were, no longer preferencing their own services, which is one of the articles that the DMA sort of prohibits. We'll talk about that in a little bit of detail. But anyway, so Mike and Greg and I ran this study, just a very small study for restaurant searches in Ireland. And we found that basically the user behavior didn't seem to be impacted relative to what we see here in the United States by the introduction of these new elements. And so we were really keen to do the same type of study in more verticals. And we're pleased to partner with Siinda on research in the home services vertical, and specifically folks looking for kitchen remodelers in, let's see, Ireland, Germany, and France, if I recall. And it was a very interesting study. We got responses back from 100 folks in each market, and kind of aggregated the data and kind of looked at what their their journeys were. So I think we're really excited to kind of discuss the results with you. Certainly, we haven't discussed them on a previous Near Media podcast, and I'm really excited to kind of hear what piqued your interest in particular about some of what we found.
So can I just read the prompt, David, that we gave to
definitely.
consumers?
Yep.
So we had 100 consumers in each of these countries. So we had 300 in total. So it's a fairly large sample size. And we asked, we said to them, you've wanted to remodel your kitchen for a long time and you're finally going to get started on it this summer. You've decided that it's too big a project to take on yourself. You're going to hire professionals for the job. You decide to search Google to help find professionals for your project. Browse and click any results you like. Please think out loud as you search and describe your thoughts and reactions. And we were able to, with their permission, videotape these interactions and listen in on their comments. And we tabulated both their clicks and their comments for these results.
Yeah. And just to be clear, everything was in their native language. So we translated the prompt through to native speakers into French and German, and folks in those two markets narrated their experiences in their native language. So everything was done natively, and then we translated on the back end kind of what folks were seeing and saying. And just before, Stephanie, I kind of turn it back over to you to kind of kick off what the most interesting findings were on your part. I did want to read Article 6.5 of the Digital Markets Act, just so people are aware, particularly in the United States. I don't think people are quite sort of up to speed on how significant a law this is in the European Union that Google has to comply with. And this Article 6.5 is effectively the anti-self-preferencing article, and I'll read it now so you can kind of just to give our audience a little bit of context on some of the questions we were interested in. So Article 6.5 says, the gatekeeper shall not treat more favorably in ranking and related indexing and crawling services and products offered by the gatekeeper itself than similar services or products of a third party. The gatekeeper shall apply transparent, fair, and non-discriminatory conditions to such ranking. So from our standpoint, Google Business Profiles are very clearly a service or product offered by the gatekeeper itself. They are the notion of a business directory profile is something offered by dozens, if not hundreds, if not thousands of websites in Europe, many of whom are members of Siinda. And we were pretty interested to see what the user behavior and the presentation looked like in this kitchen remodeling exercise. So with that as a preamble, Stephanie, why don't you take it away and kind of highlight for our audience kind of what you thought some of the most significant findings were.
Yeah, so just to stress one point, which I think is very important, it's because the DMA application really started early this year, and in March this year, the European Commission, which is the higher body responsible for application of this Digital Markets Act, ran some hearings where they convened all the gatekeepers to present their compliance mechanisms. So we ran this survey after that. I think it's important to remind also the audience of the timeline, because it was coming after the compliance mechanism that are prescribed by the Digital Markets Act were put in place. So this is different than what other surveys maybe have been raising before. The second point, which is important also from a methodology point of view, is that, as you say, it's a user survey, and this is a tremendous work that we've done also together in analyzing the data and so on. So based on the user experience search and comments. The EU is very different from the US on several parts, one of them being that we have 27 EU countries which are part of the EU, and not 27 languages, but almost 15, different languages.
At least 27 different behaviors, though.
Exactly. And the cultural mindset is also very different. So we made sure that the prompt and that what we chose in terms of the vertical and the thing was appealing to everyone. Everybody has a kitchen and somehow can relate on that. But the culture sensitivity is very different from one country to the other. So some of the most striking points that we saw, apart from the DMA, side, let's say, was also to show that there were some very big differences in the countries in the sensitivity, let's say, or the appealing methods or places where searches could take you. So just one example, the local component, the near me component, which is very usually, associated with every related local or hyper-local search, seem to be much more important in Ireland than in France and Germany. On the other hand, the brand recognition was higher in France, so it may be related to this particular vertical, but clearly people were searching for a brand more than a near me aspect. And on the other hand, I was quite surprised that the ad penetration in Germany was higher, so meaning that people actually clicked on ads, so it's it's a good sign for the digital presence here. And I think it's also showing that we have different sensitivities, and that when you target the European market, one size fits all doesn't really work, especially in the local and hyper-local sphere. So even if Google is more prominent and has the type of market share that you mentioned, there's still some room for maneuver in understanding, precisely and technically what's the sensitivity of the final customers. So, which I think is a good argument for the local players, right? But that being said, what was very striking in the research was that, of course, the compliance mechanism are supposed to make more space for any actor which is outside of the Google ecosystem, let's call it this way. So it can be publishers, it can be aggregators, it can be any type of different actor that doesn't belong or is not involved in the Google ecosystem. And in a nutshell, what the study shows, in the 3 different countries, taking into account these different sensitivities, is that the margin of external player is really, really very tiny, and that no matter how people searched and how they made their different journey, they almost always ended into the Google ecosystem mechanisms. So that was one of the most striking points that we saw from the results of the survey, showing that there needs to be some more compliance mechanism put in place, or another layer. I think we can talk again about to come more into the detail, if you want, about the difference between organics or the search page results and so on. There were some very significant common, let's say, results coming from that.
The first thing I want to pick up on was just your really important comment that the behavior in all 3 markets was, there were certainly broad strokes that were fairly consistent across all 3, but there were important nuances. And that's a finding that we also found in a follow-up study that we did in hotels, where the behavior was slightly different in Germany versus France versus Spain in terms of usage of filters and clicks on ads and that sort of thing. Market to market was pretty different. And so I think that that's an important nuance. As you said, that if American companies or companies from anywhere really are interested in getting involved in the EU and attracting consumers in the EU, it's not it's a single market economically, but culturally, there are some really important differences. And Siinda is a great organization to kind of, I think, highlight those differences and help companies understand what some of those differences are. So I think that was a really interesting piece of from the findings that I didn't expect going in, certainly. Mike, did you want to say something?
That I think we've seen this in virtually every vertical in the United States. There are differences. And here we see differences between European behaviors and U.S. behaviors. For example, in Europe, 50% of these searchers actually read reviews. In the United States, only 20% or 22%, I think is our number, actually read reviews. Most people in the United States, 78%, whatever it is, use the review stars as a key indicator and don't bother reading. Whereas in Europe, twice that many read the reviews, which I thought was a fascinating difference. And the Germans were particularly interested in review content.
And just in terms of the comparison, it's important to note, like, this is we would think kitchen remodeling is a pretty high consideration category, right? This is an expensive project, something you're gonna have to live with for a long time, probably. And the lack of reading reviews in the US occurs in similarly high consideration markets like healthcare and legal, where you're making a very important decision. And to Mike's point, we saw people reading reviews more thoroughly in Europe, certainly, than in the United States. So an important difference for sure.
But reviews were in both cultures are regularly the most important consideration in terms of picking the 3 or 4 that they're going to choose from.
Yeah, which is interesting also because, and I was very surprised by this analysis of the reviews again, because also we tend to think that U.S. businesses are better at content moderation, from the review point of view, from the European experience. So it was a big highlight to see that we are actually doing our homework a little bit better on that. But you're right. I think it's depending also on the vertical, because if you go to the restaurant one that you've done, the reviews are probably shorter and easier to read and so on. So that may be an explanation too.
I'll jump into sort of some of the DMA considerations at this point, and just talk about kind of what users saw on the search result. I think an important point here is that this is a smaller sample. It's not a massive scale with millions of keywords and millions of searches. A little bit smaller scale, but I think an important consideration is what users actually see on a search result versus what a rank tracking tool might scrape on a search result, right? So just because a rank tracking tool tells you that there is a particular element somewhere visible on the page doesn't mean that a user actually encounters it, which is particularly true for mobile searches, right? I think in this category to some extent, and certainly in the hotels category in a follow-up, a lot of mobile searchers never even made it to the organic results, right? They got a huge block of ads, and then they got largely the Google local pack, and never even saw the places sites element that Google introduced to allegedly comply with the DMA, and didn't see any organic results either. And so to your point, Stephanie, I think that the percentage of people who are sort of either seeing a Google ad, which benefits Google only, basically, not sort of the rest of the competition, and the local pack, which aggregators and publishers are not eligible for. The percentage of folks who are just seeing that set of results is substantial. And we saw even the new element that Google introduced, the places sites module. I think now they've just switched to calling it comparisons sort of across the board. That module was not as visible as the local pack was across all of the searches and all of the search results that our users
I think it showed up 42% of the time versus the local pack, which showed up 78% of the time.
Right, and the pack was frequently, I mean, both of them were usually in position 1 or position 2 if they showed up. But the pack overall had a little bit higher ranking, so you would think that goes against Article 6.5, which says that you're not supposed to treat them not more favorably, your own properties. And then in terms of engagement, we just saw such a dramatic difference. We saw a 20x engagement with the Google local pack versus this new element, the comparison, the places sites that Google introduced, which again just shows that even if that element is ranked above the local pack, Google's own properties, Google Business Profiles, are still driving the lion's share of eyeballs and engagement.
Just for our American listeners, the places site is a carousel of aggregators of directories with an image, and it scrolls left to right, and it, like David said, frequently shows very high in the search results, if not 1, then 2 on local searches, about half the time in Europe. And it was a compliance issue, but and it was introduced simultaneously with the aggregator carousel, which requires a schema on the aggregators for each aggregator to show a similar carousel. So the aggregator themselves, the directory themselves, would get 4 or 5 local businesses that would scroll through within their own result if they did the schema, which we saw very little of in Europe. Yeah. And I assume that was largely an implementation issue, that they hadn't taken the time yet to do the schema that Google was asking for to show there.
Yeah,
Yeah, but
definitely. I
again,
think,
these are both.
yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Stephanie. Yeah,
Yeah,
go ahead.
no, I was just about to say that what you said. I mean, the carousel that it's almost non-existent, right? In all the three different markets, we saw almost non-existent, and even when it was there, the number of clicks were like
That's
negligible.
right.
So
I think it
it's
was
just,
one.
yeah,
I think exactly one out of 848 total clicks from all
yeah.
300 users went to an aggregator carousel element, and so even if it is visible, users are just not engaging with it.
And that carousel is now available globally. It was rolled out in Europe, but it is available globally.
Yeah.
Whereas I think the Places site is still just in Europe.
Just in your, although I feel like I have seen it in a couple of UK results as a test, possibly for their version of the DMA, which is coming out hopefully in 2025. So yeah.
No, for sure. And one other element that also was interesting is the if we relate everything to local, which was one of the purpose, right? Is the question of the map or the images. So first of all, the image component was very important in this vertical because, as you said, you want to remodel your kitchen. You want to see pictures of what the guy has been doing before, because it's not $50 that you're spending on a meal, right? It's a little bit more substantial. So the image part is very important. And here, of course, when the aggregators carousel or where the places site is really like below the line, then you lose also the impact of the image. So this is one first point. The second point is also the map and the fact that everything that's happening is always in the Google Maps ecosystem. Yep. So again, how does the 6.5 self-preferencing treatment kick in here if you don't have any alternative map service, even if the near me searches were, the localized searches were more important in Ireland than the other countries. Still, you're still in the Google ecosystem if you click on the dot of the map. So yeah, adding to that.
And I think that's a really important point, which I wouldn't have predicted prior to actually seeing users interacting with search results. Is in this category, your kitchen is the thing that's getting remodeled. So people are coming to you to do your kitchen, and yet people were really engaged with the map when it showed up in their face on every search result. The map actually got the second most clicks overall versus other positions of either the local pack or the local finder. Position one, obviously got the most, but the map in total was number 2, which is a really striking finding that even in a home service.
In other words, people would go into the map and scroll around.
That's right.
Where ranking becomes irrelevant. I mean, it's hard to believe. I never thought anybody did that, right? But we've seen it in other verticals. We've seen it in storage as well. Yeah. The thing about the photos, two things about the photos. One was that most people click through to the business supplier's website directly at the end of this journey, which is unlike many other verticals we've looked at. So in that sense, small businesses or the businesses providing the services benefited. And when they were there, photos on the website were equally, if not more important at that point, because they'd already decided, we're going to look at these 3 from the reviews. And then they went to the website, and it was a very personal response. I feel like that expresses my sense of what I want my kitchen to look like, is what they would frequently say, something like that, not in those words, but they would look and say, I love this style, or I don't love that style. So it became a very visceral response to the types of kitchens that the business had done. So photos were, while reviews were the most mentioned, in the end, photos, I think, closed more deals.
Yeah.
I think that's right. I think that the reviews were almost the sort of filtering mechanism for consumers. Like if they didn't have a good review profile, they weren't going to take the next step. And that the website click-throughs, which sort of surprising to me relative to other verticals, something like 71% of all interactions did end up with at least a click to a website, which is a little bit high. Certainly was higher than restaurants, which makes some sense. But to Mike's point and Stephanie's point, photos were really, really, really closed the deal for a lot of our searchers. I just want to make one sort of, not to put too fine a point on it, but the reason that we're sort of very interested in the engagement in the map part of the local pack, again, this is not an element that is available to Google's competitors, i.e. aggregators, directories that compete with Google business profiles, right? No aggregator is getting a map alongside Google's map showing its own profiles. And so I think that this is a pretty clear indication of Google not applying the same ranking, indexing, and crawling mechanisms to third parties as it is to its own properties.
And in that vein, Google removed the upper link to allow users to bring the query directly over to Maps. And some users complained about the missing link. And the only way they could engage was through the local hack with the map. And they still did. In other words, Google has trained people very, very well to use their map, even when they removed the link to it, which was a compliance move, which, again, sort of a non-compliance.
Malicious compliance, right? It's
Yes.
sort of kind of what I've heard it described as. Yeah.
Right. Get users to complain so they'll put it back.
Yeah, no, exactly. That was one of the key elements that came because there was a compliance update also from their side Octoberish, during October, and they referred to that also saying, yeah, we don't want the user experience to be completely messed up if we all end up with only the blue links that we had, 20 years ago. And this is not the case, right? This is just, as you say, alleged compliance or using some of the compliance mechanism, but the text of the DMA 6.5 doesn't say that, right? You read it, David, is just saying you shouldn't self-preference your own services, but it doesn't say, it doesn't give any particular methods to do that. So it's a little bit biased to use this argument in order to circumvent it, right?
One area that they are correct, though, or at least they point out the contradiction, which is that search services many businesses, both aggregators, directories, as well as direct businesses. And there is some trade-off involved in that if Google changes the search results, it might effectively change user behavior in terms of where they go and how many steps they have to go and whatever. And so there is some difficulty, I would imagine, on Google's part in their defense, which I don't frequently do. But in their defense, I can see there may be some difficulty in achieving the right balance of compliance and distribution of those clicks.
I would not call their Sorry, go ahead, Stephanie.
Go ahead. No, I was about to say it may also depend. It may also depend on the vertical, because I know you've done another survey in the hotels, right? And
yes.
One of the findings also from the hotels is that eventually it may send traffic from one gatekeeper to the other one. I'm not going to say any names, but I think we'll understand. So this can be also a side effect, whereas in this particular vertical, it's right. It's sending traffic to the actual business owner, which is of course the overall aim. So I think we have to see the DMA application can be very different from one vertical to the other, and that is also it can circle back, because there's the Article 6.5 on self-preferencing, but there's also a lot of other elements on anti-steering and so on that can be tied in and make all of that very difficult to comply with. So,
to your hotel point, and they're sending one aggregator sending traffic over to another. It was clear that in the ads that the system worked in such a way that only aggregators could compete in that ad space by virtue of efficiencies and other things. So the ad space wasn't even open to individual hotels and such. So it opens up a whole new can of worms in terms of distribution of clicks and accessibility of, if ads are going to become the major way that people interact with Google, then how are they going to distribute those in a way that would make it even fair? I don't know.
Yeah. Definitely a difficult topic, I think, for the commission and the regulators to kind of dive into is the ads piece. And to Mike's point, at least, so Google business profiles, aggregators and publishers not eligible. At least with ads, everybody is theoretically eligible for local ads at this point. Outside of local service ads, I guess. But in the hotel space, individual hotel properties and directories or aggregators and publishers all could have been advertising in that space. And yet, to Mike's point, only aggregators were the ones that were able to actually close enough of those clicks into a booking where it penciled out financially for them to bid in that space. So I think that's a really important point. Even if eligibility is fair and transparent across the board, the economic realities may not be that way behind the scenes. So I think we've kind of done a pretty good job kind of covering the high notes of our home services study. Is there anything else either on the study that you wanted to add, Stephanie, or things that you're looking ahead to in early 2025 as far as the DMA? As you mentioned, there was a reshuffle in the commission.
Yeah.
What's on your radar to start the new year?
Yeah, so I think as you said, I mean, there's been European elections in the European Parliament this year, and also a reshuffle at the top of the European Commission. So everybody changed. So the actual commission was vetted on December 1st. So you see, it's been 19 days in office. So we can't really see anything moving here, but we know that the DMA, compliance of the DMA, and especially making sure that there is a fair level playing field, is high on the political agenda of the European Union. So definitely this will stay. It needs the teams to be in place, and the focus will probably be also on nominating other gatekeepers also that can be involved in other sectors like e-commerce or these kind of things. So there will definitely be a lot of work on that, but we think that there will be some follow-up actions, or at least comments from the European Commission in this particular space, because the self-preferencing is a key element not only for the search part, as I said, but also kicking in with other gatekeepers. So definitely good to follow up, and we'll stay tuned on the next steps to come in 2025.
And where can people go to stay up to date on some of these developments through Siinda? Where should they go?
Yeah, so feel free to go to our website, www.siinda.org. We have a DMA research page here, so you can go there and you can see part of the study, and then the whole monitoring and overview of the regulatory perspective is available to all the Siinda members. So you are all welcome to become Siinda members for sure. Always happy to welcome you.
That's great.
We
certainly
also have a summary of the research on our site that you can get a link to Siinda's site. So If you go to our DMA section, you can find it.
Yeah, and we're planning. I mean, we don't know yet, but we're planning on replicating some of the research. We don't know the modalities yet, but to do other countries and other geographies also, because it's important, as you say, to have the different sensitivities. So yeah, on the long-term project, we have that on the radar too.
For sure. Well, we look forward to participating as much as we can moving forward with you guys, and appreciate your time here today. And again, recommend anyone who's interested in really anything related to digital marketing and local businesses in Europe, definitely go to Siinda.org. SIINDA.org, and stay up to date on everything that Stephanie's organization is doing. So thanks very much for joining us. We've got one more episode of the Near Memo coming out this year. It'll be our 2024 year in review. So stay tuned for that, and hope everyone has a great holiday break. Tell all of your friends about the Near Memo. Please sign up. We actually just made a big change at Near Media and put most of our analysis content and our bi-weekly newsletter or semi-weekly newsletter behind a paywall. So we hope that you'll consider subscribing before the end of the year. It makes a great B2B holiday gift for those of you who might have clients or partner agencies who'd be interested in that. So thanks very much for listening, and we will see you in 2025.
Thanks for joining David, Mike, and Greg. To stay on top of the latest developments in local, subscribe to our newsletter at nearmedia.co. We'll see you next week.